An abusive husband locks his pregnant wife in the attic. Mafia boss opens door and finds the truth. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Now, let's jump right back in. The crystal chandeliers above cast shadows that feel heavier than they should. Every clink of expensive champagne, every laugh exchanged between powerful men, it all floats through the grand estate like a carefully rehearsed performance. Mikkel Raymond moves through his guests with the practiced ease of a man who knows how to smile while his hands stay clean. But tonight, something is different. Tonight, his eyes keep drifting upward, toward the ceiling, toward the part of his home no one is allowed to see. Above the party, in an attic that smells of rot and neglect, Haya Darling sits on bare wooden boards. Her dress, once white, is now gray with dust and streaked with filth. Her hands rest on her swollen belly, and she listens to the music below, the sound of people who have forgotten she exists. Cedric Russell wasn't supposed to wander. He came for business, nothing more. A merger, a signature, a handshake with a man desperate to climb into his world. But boredom has a way of making men curious, and when he hears it, a faint scratching sound, rhythmic and deliberate, coming from somewhere above, he excuses himself from the table and follows it. No one stops him. No one dares. What Cedric finds behind that attic door will unravel more than Michael's lies. It will crack open a debt Cedric didn't know he owed, expose a cruelty that hid behind wealth and charm, and set into motion a reckoning that will leave this estate in ruins. Because the man who thought he could lock away his sins is about to learn that some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. And some men, once crossed, do not negotiate. Stay with us, because when the truth steps out of that attic, every polished surface in this house will be stained with it. The invitation had arrived 3 weeks earlier, embossed in gold on cream paper so thick it felt like cloth. Michael Raymond was not a man Cedric would have chosen to associate with under ordinary circumstances. He was new money trying to wear the skin of old wealth, a real estate developer who had clawed his way up through questionable deals and well-placed bribes. But Mikkel had something Cedric needed, a chain of waterfront properties that would legitimize a venture Cedric had been planning for the better part of 2 years. The man was a means to an end, nothing more. The estate itself was a monument to insecurity, marble columns imported from Italy, fountains that belonged in a European palace, hedges trimmed into geometric perfection. Everything screamed desperation, a plea to be seen as someone who mattered. Cedric's black sedan rolled up the circular driveway at exactly 8:30 p.m., flanked by 2 SUVs carrying his security detail. He stepped out into the cool evening air, his dark suit tailored to precision, his expression unreadable. Mikhail was waiting at the entrance, grinning like a man who had just won the lottery. He extended a hand too eagerly, his palm slightly damp. Cedric shook it briefly and released. "Mr. Russell, what an honor," Michael said, his voice pitching higher than it should. "I can't tell you how thrilled I am that you accepted my invitation." Cedric said nothing. He let his silence do the work, watched Michael's smile falter at the edges. The man gestured toward the open doors, and Cedric followed him inside. The ballroom was excessive. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen fireworks, tables draped in silk, servers in crisp uniforms gliding between clusters of guests who wore their wealth like armor. Cedric recognized a few faces, a state senator, a tech mogul, a shipping magnate whose company Cedric had quietly acquired 6 months ago. They all turned when he entered, their conversations pausing for half a breath before resuming at a lower volume. Mikhail led him to a private table near the far wall, away from the crowd but positioned to see everything. 2 bodyguards took their places at a discreet distance. Cedric sat, accepted a glass of whiskey he had no intention of drinking, and let Michael begin his pitch. It was rehearsed, polished. Michael spoke about opportunities and partnerships, about vision and legacy. He name-dropped contacts and cited projections that sounded too convenient to be accurate. Cedric listened without interrupting, his gaze occasionally drifting across the room. Something felt wrong, not dangerous, but off, like a stage set with a loose board. Mikhail laughed too loud at his own joke. A woman in emerald silk glanced toward the table and quickly looked away. A server nearly dropped a tray, and Mikhail kept looking up. It was subtle. A flick of the eyes toward the ceiling, a tension in his jaw that appeared and vanished in the space of a heartbeat. He was performing confidence, but his body told a different story. Cedric had spent years reading men like this, knowing when they were lying, when they were afraid, when they were hiding something they prayed would stay buried. "Your wife," Cedric said, cutting through Michael's speech. "She's not here." Michael froze, just for a second. Then the smile returned wider than before. "Haya's not feeling well. The pregnancy, you know. She's resting upstairs. Didn't want to overwhelm her with all this." He waved a hand at the ballroom. Cedric nodded slowly. He filed the answer away, noting the speed at which it came, the over-explanation. The conversation continued, but Cedric was no longer listening. His instincts, honed by years of surviving in a world where hesitation meant death, were screaming at him. Something was rotting behind these walls, something Mikhail was desperate to keep hidden. And Cedric had learned long ago that desperate men make mistakes. He would wait, he would watch, and when the moment came, he would follow the thread until it unraveled completely. Because Cedric Russell had not built an empire by ignoring his gut. And tonight, his gut was telling him that this house, this party, this man, they were all built on a lie. 3 floors above, in an attic that had once been used for storing forgotten furniture and childhood toys, Haya Darling counted the hours by the rhythm of music filtering through the floorboards. She could hear the orchestra now. Strings and piano weaving together into something that might have been beautiful if she weren't trapped listening to it from a prison of splintered wood and dust. Her back pressed against the wall, the only position that didn't send sharp pains through her lower spine. The baby had been moving more tonight, restless kicks against her ribs that reminded her she wasn't alone, that someone else depended on her survival. She whispered to the child sometimes, promised things she didn't know if she could keep. Safety, freedom, a life where locked doors didn't exist. The attic was barely 10 feet across, with a sloped ceiling that made standing impossible except in the very center. Cobwebs hung in the corners like rotted lace. A single bare bulb dangled from a wire, but Mikhail had removed it weeks ago, leaving her in darkness except for the thin slivers of light that crept through the gaps in the wooden boards. During the day, she could see dust particles floating in those narrow beams. At night, there was nothing. Her dress had been beautiful once, white cotton with delicate embroidery along the hem, something she had worn to a garden party back when she still believed Michael's promises, back when his hands had been gentle and his words had sounded like love instead of threats. Now the fabric was torn at the shoulder, stained with dirt and sweat. clinging to her swollen body like a burial shroud. She had tried screaming the first week, pounded her fists against the wooden hatch until her hands bled. But the attic was in the east wing, far from the main living quarters, and the walls were thick. No one came. Or maybe someone heard and chose to ignore it. Michael employed 12 staff members, and not one of them had questioned where the lady of the house had gone. The lies he told were simple, efficient. She was visiting family. She was recovering from a difficult pregnancy. She needed rest and privacy. People believed what they wanted to believe, especially when the person telling the story had money and influence and a smile that could charm snakes. Haya had stopped screaming after that first week. She learned to save her energy, to ration the water Mikhail brought her every 3 days in a plastic jug, to eat the stale bread and bruised fruit he tossed through the hatch like she was an animal in a cage. She learned to sleep sitting up because lying down made her dizzy. She learned to measure time by the baby's movements and the distant sounds of a house that had forgotten her. Tonight was different, though. Tonight there was a party, which meant Michael was distracted, which meant she had hours where he wouldn't come up to check on her, to remind her what would happen if she made noise. She had found a shard of broken glass 2 days ago, part of an old picture frame left behind in the corner. The edges were sharp enough to scratch wood. She had been carving a message into the floorboards near the hatch. Just her name at first. Haya darling. Then the date, as best as she could remember it. October 18th. Then a desperate plea to whoever might find it. Help me, I am locked here. He won't let me leave. Her fingers ached from gripping the glass. Blood had dried along her palm where the edge had cut her, but she kept working, kept scratching letters into the wood with a focus that felt like the only thing keeping her sane. The sound was rhythmic, deliberate. Scratch, pause, scratch, pause. A pattern that echoed through the silence. She thought about her mother sometimes, wondered if the woman even knew she was missing. They hadn't spoken in over a year, not since Haya had married Michael against her mother's warnings. "You don't know him," her mother had said. "You don't know what he's capable of." But Haya had been young and stubborn and so certain that love could conquer anything. She knew better now. Love didn't conquer, it surrendered. The music below grew louder. Laughter bubbled up through the floorboards like something toxic. She imagined Michael down there, playing the role of gracious host, shaking hands with men who controlled empires, while his pregnant wife starved 3 floors above them. The thought made her stomach turn, but there was nothing left inside her to vomit. She leaned her head back against the wall and closed her eyes. The baby kicked again, harder this time, and she placed her hand over the spot, felt the tiny foot press against her palm. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry you're here." The glass shard slipped from her fingers and clattered against the wood. She was too tired to pick it up, too tired to keep scratching messages no one would ever read. Her body felt heavy, like it was sinking into the floor, becoming part of the attic itself. Maybe that was how it would end. Maybe she would just fade into the dust and cobwebs, and years from now someone would find her bones and wonder who she had been. But then she heard it. Footsteps. Not Michael's. These were different, heavier, slower. They were coming from the hallway outside the east wing, moving closer. She held her breath, pressed her hand against her mouth to keep from making a sound. The footsteps stopped, then started again, then stopped directly below the attic hatch. Someone was standing right beneath her. Haya's heart hammered against her ribs. She didn't know if she should hope or be terrified. If it was one of Mikkel's men, they would tell him she had been making noise, and he would come up here with that look in his eyes, the one that promised pain. But if it was someone else, someone who didn't know, someone who might actually care, then maybe, just maybe, this nightmare could end. She reached for the glass shard again, gripped it tight, and began to scratch. Louder this time. Faster. The sound echoing through the attic like a desperate heartbeat. Help me, please. Someone help me. The scratching stopped as suddenly as it started. Haya froze, her fingers still wrapped around the glass shard, blood pounding in her ears so loudly she could barely hear anything else. The footsteps below had gone silent. Whoever was down there had either left or was standing perfectly still, listening the same way she was. She pressed her ear against the floorboards, trying to catch any sound, any sign that someone had heard her. Nothing. Just the distant hum of the party, the orchestra transitioning into something slower, waltz music that felt obscene given where she was and what she was living through. Then the footsteps resumed, moving away this time, fading down the hallway. Haya felt something inside her collapse. They were leaving. Whoever it was, they were walking away. She had been so close, and now they were gone. She let the glass shard fall from her hand and pulled her knees up as much as her swollen belly would allow, wrapping her arms around them. The tears came without warning, hot and bitter, and she didn't try to stop them. Crying was pointless. It changed nothing. But sometimes the body needed to release what the mind couldn't hold anymore. Down in the ballroom, Mikhail Raymond was smiling. It was the kind of smile that belonged on magazine covers, charming and confident and entirely manufactured. He moved between his guests with practiced grace, refilling glasses, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, making each person feel like they were the most important one in the room. This was his talent. This was what had gotten him this far, the ability to make people see what he wanted them to see while hiding everything else. But tonight, his performance required more effort than usual. Cedric Russell's presence had thrown off his rhythm. The man sat at the private table like a king observing peasants, barely touching his drink, speaking only when spoken to, and watching everything with eyes that missed nothing. Mikhail had dealt with powerful men before, had learned how to flatter and manipulate and position himself as indispensable. But Cedric was different. There was something cold in him, something that didn't respond to the usual tactics. A woman in sapphire silk approached Mikhail near the dessert table. Vanessa Cho, a socialite whose family owned half the commercial real estate downtown. She held a champagne flute in one hand and smiled in that way wealthy women did when they were about to ask something intrusive. "Michael, darling," she said, her voice carrying just enough volume to be heard by the people nearby. "Where is that beautiful wife of yours? I was so hoping to see her tonight." Michael's smile didn't falter. He had prepared for this question, had rehearsed the answer until it sounded natural. "Haya's resting upstairs. The pregnancy has been difficult, you know. Her doctor recommended she avoid large gatherings for now. Too much stress isn't good for the baby." Vanessa's expression shifted into something resembling sympathy, though her eyes remained sharp. "Oh, the poor dear. How far along is she now?" 7 months, Michael said smoothly. "We're both very excited, of course, just being cautious." "Well, please send her my love. Tell her we're all thinking of her." "I will. Thank you, Vanessa." She drifted away, and Michael exhaled slowly through his nose. One question answered. There would be more. There were always more. But the story held. It always did. People wanted to believe him because the alternative, that he might be lying, that something darker might be happening under his roof, was too uncomfortable to consider. It was easier to accept the polite fiction and move on. Another guest approached, this time an older man with silver hair and a navy suit. Edmund Vance, a venture capitalist with connections Michael desperately wanted access to. Michael, wonderful party, truly. But I have to ask, is it true you're negotiating with Cedric Russell? Michael nodded, his chest swelling slightly with pride. We're discussing a partnership. Nothing finalized yet, but the conversations have been promising. Edmund's eyebrows lifted. Impressive. That man doesn't partner with just anyone. You must have something he wants. I believe we can offer each other mutual benefits, Michael said carefully. He's a smart businessman. He recognizes opportunity when he sees it. Just be careful, Edmund said, lowering his voice. Russell's reputation isn't built on kindness. He's taken apart men twice your size for less than a bad deal. I'm aware, Michael replied, though the warning sent a thread of unease through him. But I'm confident we can come to an agreement that satisfies both parties. Edmund clapped him on the shoulder. Good luck, you'll need it. As Edmund walked away, Michael glanced toward Cedric's table. The man was still sitting there, still watching, his expression unreadable. One of Michael's security guards stood near the hallway that led to the east wing, a subtle reminder that certain areas of the house were off limits. Michael had made it clear earlier in the evening. No one goes upstairs, no one wanders. Anyone who tries gets escorted out. But as Michael looked around the room, he realized something. Cedric's two bodyguards were still positioned near the table. Cedric himself was gone. Panic flared in Michael's chest, hot and immediate. He scanned the ballroom, his eyes darting from face to face, searching for the dark suit, the cold expression, the presence that couldn't be missed. Nothing. Cedric Russell had left the table, and no one had noticed. Or if they hadn't thought to mention it. Mikhail excused himself from a conversation he wasn't listening to and moved quickly toward the nearest hallway, keeping his expression neutral even as his heart rate spiked. He pulled out his phone and texted his head of security. Where is Russell? The response came seconds later. Unknown. Lost visual 2 minutes ago. Mikhail's jaw tightened. He typed back. Find him. Now. He pocketed his phone and forced himself to slow down, to breathe, to think. Cedric couldn't have gone far. The house was large, but it wasn't a maze. And even if he had wandered off, what could he possibly find? The attic was locked. The east wing was restricted. Haya couldn't make noise loud enough to be heard over the party. But doubt crept in anyway, cold and persistent. What if Cedric had heard something? What if he had seen one of the guards acting strangely? What if right now, at this very moment, he was standing in front of that attic hatch, listening to the desperate scratching of a woman Michael had promised the world would never find? Michael walked faster, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. He turned the corner toward the east wing and nearly collided with one of his guards, a broad-shouldered man named Derek, who looked like he had just seen something he shouldn't have. Sir, Derek said quietly, we have a situation. Michael's stomach dropped. What situation? Mr. Russell was spotted near the service stairs. He was heading toward the upper floors. The world seemed to tilt. Mikhail grabbed Derek's arm, his grip tight enough to hurt. Did he go up? We're not sure. We lost him in the hallway. Mikhail released him and started walking, then running, his carefully constructed facade crumbling with every step. If Cedric found her, if he opened that door, everything Michael had built would collapse. His reputation, his business, his future. All of it would be gone in the time it took for one man to shine a light into the darkness Michael had been hiding. He reached the base of the service stairs and looked up. The hallway above was empty, bathed in shadows. But somewhere in that darkness, Cedric Russell was moving, and Michael had no idea if he was already too late. Cedric had excused himself from the table at exactly 9:45 p.m., citing the need for a restroom. His bodyguards had remained in position, a strategic choice. Men like Mikhail Raymond always watched the muscle, assuming the threat came from visible force. They forgot that the most dangerous predators hunted alone. The party's noise faded as Cedric moved deeper into the house. He had memorized the layout during his initial tour, noting exits and blind spots out of habit. The East Wing had caught his attention immediately. Mikhail had steered him away from it, offering a practiced comment about renovations and closed-off areas. But there were no construction sounds, no smell of fresh paint, no workers. Just a hallway Michael didn't want anyone to see. Cedric's instincts had been honed over 20 years of surviving in a world where hesitation meant death. He had learned to read body language the way others read books, to sense deception before words were even spoken. And everything about Michael Raymond screamed concealment, the nervous glances upward, the over-explanation about his wife. The security guard positioned specifically to block access to one particular corridor. The service stairs were narrow and poorly lit, designed for staff to move unseen through the house. Cedric climbed them silently, his footsteps absorbed by worn carpet. At the top, a hallway stretched into dimness, lined with closed doors. The air here felt different, stale, neglected, like a part of the house that had been deliberately forgotten. He moved forward, listening. The party music was barely audible now, a distant murmur that made the silence around him feel heavier. 3 doors on the left, 2 on the right, all closed. He tested the first handle, locked. The second, a linen closet stacked with dusty sheets. The third opened into an empty bedroom with furniture covered in white cloth. Then he heard it, a sound so faint he almost missed it. Rhythmic, deliberate, scratch, pause, coming from above. Cedric stopped walking and tilted his head, focusing on the source. The ceiling. No, not the ceiling exactly. Higher, an attic, maybe, or a storage space. The scratching continued, desperate and methodical, like someone trying to claw their way through wood. He looked up and saw it. A hatch in the ceiling at the end of the hallway, nearly invisible in the shadows. A rope dangled from its edge, barely within reach. And positioned directly beneath it, almost invisible in the poor lighting, was a wooden crate that looked like it had been placed there intentionally. A step, a way up. The scratching stopped. Cedric stood perfectly still, his pulse steady, his mind calculating. Someone was up there. Someone who wanted to be heard. And Michael Raymond had gone to considerable effort to make sure no one listened. He pulled out his phone and checked the time. 9:52 p.m. He had maybe 10 minutes before Michiel realized he was missing and sent people to find him. Not enough time to investigate properly and get back without raising suspicion, but enough time to confirm what his instincts were screaming at him. Cedric moved to the crate and tested its stability with his foot. Solid. He stepped up, reached for the rope, and pulled. The hatch resisted at first, then gave way with a groan of old hinges. Dust rained down, and with it came a smell that made his jaw tighten. Unwashed bodies, waste, fear. The scratching started again, louder now, frantic. Whoever was up there knew someone had opened the hatch. Cedric pulled himself up, his arms taking his weight as he lifted his head through the opening. The attic was dark, almost completely black, except for thin strips of moonlight filtering through gaps in the roof. He pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight, sweeping the beam across the space. The light caught her immediately. A woman, sitting against the far wall, her face streaked with dirt and tears. Her dress was torn and filthy, clinging to a body that was visibly pregnant. Her hair hung in tangled knots around her shoulders. Her eyes, wide and terrified, locked onto his like she wasn't sure if he was real or another hallucination brought on by isolation. For 3 seconds, Cedric didn't move, didn't speak. His mind processed what he was seeing, filing away details with mechanical precision. The bruises on her arms, the dried blood on her hands. The glass shard clutched in her fingers like a weapon. The message scratched into the floorboards beside her. "Help me." Then she spoke, her voice hoarse and broken. "Please, please don't tell him you found me. He'll kill me. He'll kill the baby." Cedric's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. He had seen cruelty before, had inflicted it when necessary. But this was different. This wasn't business. This wasn't strategy. This was a man locking his pregnant wife in an attic and throwing parties while she starved 3 floors above his guests. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice low and controlled. "Hiya," she whispered. "Hiya, darling. I'm his wife, Michael's wife. He locked me here. I don't know how long, weeks, maybe more." Cedric's jaw tightened. "Why?" She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I tried to leave him. I found out what he was doing, illegal deals, money laundering. I told him I was going to report it. He said no one would believe me. Then he brought me here and locked the door." The sound of footsteps echoed from somewhere below. Multiple sets, moving fast. Michael's security, searching for him. Cedric looked at Haya, then at the hatch. He could leave, could pretend he never saw this. It wasn't his problem, wasn't his business. He had come here for a merger, not a rescue mission. But then Haya's hand moved to her stomach, a protective gesture that was entirely unconscious, and something in Cedric's chest twisted. He thought of his own mother, long dead now. Thought of the times she had protected him when he was young and the world was trying to swallow him whole. "I'm going to get you out," he said. Haya's eyes widened. "You can't. He'll stop you. He has guards everywhere. I don't care what he has." "You don't understand. He's dangerous." Cedric's expression turned cold. "So am I." The footsteps were closer now, voices calling his name. Mikhail's voice, higher pitched than before, barely concealing panic. "Stay quiet," Cedric said. "Don't make a sound. I'll come back for you." "Wait," Haya said, her voice breaking. "What if you don't? What if he finds out and moves me somewhere worse? Cedric met her eyes, and for the first time that night, his expression softened, just barely. Just enough for her to see that he meant what he said. I don't leave debts unpaid, and I don't leave people in cages. He lowered himself back through the hatch, pulled it closed, and stepped off the crate just as Michael rounded the corner with 3 security guards. The man was breathing hard, his carefully styled hair falling across his forehead, his smile long gone. Cedric, Michael said, forcing lightness into his tone. There you are. We were worried you'd gotten lost. Cedric brushed dust off his sleeve and looked at Michael with the same cold expression he had worn all evening. Your house is bigger than it looks. I was trying to find a quieter restroom. Of course, this wing is closed for renovations. Let me show you back to the main floor. Cedric nodded and followed, but his mind was already working. He had found Mikhail's secret, and now he had a choice to make. Walk away and let this house keep its rot buried, or burn it all down and pull Haya Darling out of the ashes. The decision, in the end, was easier than he expected. Cedric followed Mikhail back down the service stairs, his face a mask of indifference, while his mind worked through variables and outcomes. Michael was talking, some rehearsed explanation about construction permits and structural concerns, but Cedric barely heard him. He was calculating. How many guards? How many exits? How quickly he could move Haya out of the house without alerting everyone in the ballroom. They emerged into the main corridor, and Michael's smile returned, plastic and desperate. I apologize for the confusion. The staff should have been clearer about which areas are accessible. No harm done, Cedric said flatly. Wonderful. Let's get you back to the party. I believe dessert is being served. Cedric nodded but stopped walking. Actually, I need to make a call first. Business matter. Won't take long. Mikhail's smile faltered. Of course. There's a study just down this hall. Private. You can use it. I'll find it. Mikhail hesitated, clearly wanting to escort him, but unable to insist without seeming paranoid. Right. I'll be in the ballroom when you're finished. Cedric watched him leave, waited until the man disappeared around the corner, then pulled out his phone. He didn't go to the study. Instead, he moved to a window overlooking the front drive where his cars were parked and dialed a number he had on speed dial. Victor answered on the second ring. Boss? Change of plans, Cedric said quietly. I need you and the team ready to move in 15 minutes. Full extraction protocol. There was a pause. Victor had worked for Cedric for 12 years and knew better than to ask questions when his tone shifted like this. Understood. Target? A woman. Pregnant. Being held on the 3rd floor, East Wing attic. Access through a ceiling hatch at the end of the hallway. She's injured and malnourished. We'll need medical standing by. On it. Rules of engagement? Cedric's jaw tightened. Anyone who tries to stop us goes down. Non-lethal if possible, but priority is getting her out safely. Copy that. 15 minutes. Cedric ended the call and slipped his phone back into his pocket. He stood at the window for a moment, looking out at the manicured lawns and fountain that probably cost more than most people earned in a year. Everything about this place was a performance. A lie wrapped in expensive landscaping and imported marble. He turned and made his way back to the ballroom. The party was still in full swing, guests laughing and drinking and pretending their wealth made them immune to consequence. Mikhail stood near the center, talking to an older couple, his posture relaxed now that Cedric was back in sight. Cedric returned to his table and sat down. His two bodyguards gave him subtle nods, confirming they were ready. He picked up his glass of whiskey, still untouched, and took a small sip. The burn steadied him, focused him. Michael approached a few minutes later, his smile back to full wattage. "Everything all right with your call?" "Fine," Cedric said, "just confirming some numbers." "Good, good. I was hoping we could discuss the specifics of our partnership. I have projections I'd love to show you." Cedric looked at him, really looked at him, and saw exactly what Mikhail was. A coward who hid behind money and charm. A man who would lock his pregnant wife in an attic and serve champagne to strangers while she suffered. The kind of man Cedric had spent his life learning to destroy. "Show me," Cedric said. Michael's face lit up. He gestured to one of the staff, who brought over a leather portfolio. Mikhail opened it, spreading documents across the table. Revenue projections, property surveys, market analysis. All of it meticulously prepared. All of it designed to convince Cedric that partnering with Mikhail Raymond was the smartest decision he could make. Cedric pretended to read, nodded in the right places, asked a few questions that made Michael think he was genuinely interested, but his eyes kept tracking the time on his watch. 10:03 p.m. 12 minutes until Victor and his team moved into position. "These numbers are impressive," Cedric said, though he had barely glanced at them. "I'm glad you think so. I truly believe this partnership could be transformative for both of us." "Transformative," Cedric repeated. "Interesting word." Mikhail leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Between you and me, Cedric, I've been working toward this moment for years. Getting the right properties, building the right connections. Everything has been leading to this." "And your wife?" Cedric asked casually. "She supports this venture?" The question landed like a stone in water. Mikhail's expression froze for half a second before the smile returned. "Haya's focus is on the baby right now, but yes, she's supportive." "Good. Family approval matters." "Absolutely." 10:09 p.m., 6 minutes. Cedric stood abruptly. "I need some air, the ballroom's warm." Mikhail started to rise. "I'll join you." "That's not necessary." "I insist. There's a terrace out back with a beautiful view." Cedric nodded, accepting the redirect. He followed Mikhail through a set of glass doors onto a stone terrace overlooking gardens lit with soft amber lights. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of jasmine and recently cut grass. A few other guests milled about, smoking cigars and talking in low voices. Michael stood beside him, looking out at the gardens like a lord surveying his domain. "Beautiful, isn't it? Haya used to spend hours out here. She loved the gardens." Cedric's hands curled into fists at his sides. The casual way Michael spoke about her, as if she were just away on vacation instead of locked in an attic covered in her own filth. The audacity of it was almost impressive. "You must miss having her around," Cedric said. "I do, but her health comes first." 10:13 p.m. 2 minutes. Cedric's phone vibrated in his pocket. A single pulse. The signal. Victor was in position. "Michael," Cedric said, his voice dropping into something colder, "I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer." Mikhail turned to him, confusion flickering across his face. "Of course." "What is it?" "Where is your wife?" The color drained from Mikhail's face. I told you. She's upstairs, resting. No, Cedric said quietly. She's not resting. She's locked in your attic, starving, terrified, and you've been serving dessert while she bleeds into the floorboards. Michael took a step back, his hands rising defensively. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't insult me by lying. Cedric, listen. Whatever you think you saw. I saw enough. Michael's expression shifted from shock to calculation. His hand moved toward his pocket, probably reaching for his phone to call security. But Cedric was faster. He grabbed Michael's wrist and twisted, not hard enough to break, but enough to send pain shooting up his arm. Michael gasped, his phone clattering onto the stone terrace. Here's what's going to happen, Cedric said, his voice barely above a whisper. My men are already in your house. They're getting Haya out right now. You can cooperate and walk away from this with some dignity intact, or you can fight me and lose everything. Your choice. Michael's eyes darted toward the ballroom, toward his guards. You can't do this. This is my house. My property. She's not property. She's my wife. Not anymore. Cedric released him and stepped back. Through the glass doors, he could see movement. His team, dressed in black, moving through the hallway with professional efficiency. They weren't hiding, weren't sneaking. They were walking through Michael's house like they owned it, because in this moment, they did. Guests started noticing. Conversations stopped. Someone screamed. Security guards rushed forward but stopped when Victor appeared at the front of the group, carrying Hia in his arms. She was wrapped in a blanket, her face barely visible, but her eyes were open. She was alive. Michael made a sound like a wounded animal and tried to run toward them, but Cedric caught him by the collar and slammed him against the terrace railing. Watch, Cedric said. Watch her leave. Watch your lies fall apart, and know that every person in that ballroom is about to learn exactly what kind of man you are. Michael struggled against Cedric's grip, his face contorting between rage and desperation. You have no idea what you've done. She's unstable. She's lying. Whatever she told you. She didn't have to tell me anything, Cedric interrupted, his voice like iron. The bruises told me. The blood on the floorboards told me. The fact that you locked your pregnant wife in an attic like an animal told me everything I need to know. Through the glass doors, the ballroom had erupted into chaos. Guests pressed forward, trying to see what was happening. Victor moved through the crowd, with Haya still in his arms, his expression brooking no interference. Two of Cedric's other men flanked him, creating a protective barrier. Haya's face was buried against Victor's chest, her body trembling. Vanessa Cho's voice cut through the noise, shrill and disbelieving. Is that Haya? My God, what happened to her? Cedric released Michael and walked back into the ballroom. The crowd parted for him instinctively, people stepping aside without conscious thought. Power had a language all its own, and everyone in this room spoke it fluently enough to recognize when they were in the presence of someone who wouldn't hesitate to use it. Victor stopped when Cedric reached him. Up close, Haya looked even worse than she had in the attic. Her skin was pale, almost translucent. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. The blanket wrapped around her couldn't hide how thin she had become, how her collarbone jutted out at sharp angles. But her eyes were focused now, alert. They found Cedric's face and held there, searching for something. Confirmation, maybe, or permission to believe this was real. You're safe, Cedric said quietly, just loud enough for her to hear. No one's going to hurt you again. Haya's breath hitched, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I don't understand. Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Cedric's expression softened in a way few people ever saw. "You don't have to understand. You just have to breathe and let us get you somewhere safe." Michael burst through the doors, his face flushed, his carefully styled hair disheveled. "Put her down, right now. She's my wife. You have no legal right." "Your wife?" Cedric turned to face him, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Is that what you call someone you imprison and starve?" The ballroom went silent. Every conversation stopped. Every glass paused halfway to lips. The orchestra, which had continued playing through sheer confusion, finally ceased. Edmund Vance stepped forward, his silver hair catching the chandelier light. "Michael, what is he talking about?" Michael's mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out. He looked around the room, searching for allies, for anyone who might believe him over Cedric. But the evidence was too visible. Haya's condition spoke louder than any denial he could manufacture. "She's been ill," Michael finally managed. "Mentally ill. I've been trying to protect her from herself. She hurts herself when she's having episodes. The attic was temporary, just until I could find proper care." "Liar." The word came from Haya, hoarse and broken, but carrying across the silent room. She lifted her head from Victor's chest, her eyes locked on Michael with something that looked like hatred mixed with exhausted relief. "I tried to leave you. I found the documents, the offshore accounts, the bribes, and you said if I told anyone you'd make sure I disappeared." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones came out, cameras pointed. The kind of scandal that would dominate headlines and destroy reputations was unfolding in real time, and no one wanted to miss recording it. Michael's face went from red to white. "She's delusional. The pregnancy hormones." "Stop talking," Cedric said, his voice cutting through Michael's excuses like a blade. "Every word you say makes this worse for you. You can't prove anything." "I don't need to prove it. Your guests already believe it. Look at their faces." Michael turned, and for the first time seemed to register the expressions surrounding him. Shock, disgust, horror. These were people who had come here seeking his favor, wanting access to his supposed success. Now they were backing away like he carried a disease. Vanessa Cho's voice rang out, cold and sharp. "I'm calling my lawyer, and then I'm calling the police." Others pulled out their phones, voices rising as they made similar declarations. The social order that Mikhail had spent years cultivating was collapsing in real time, each person distancing themselves from him as fast as possible. Cedric turned his attention back to Haya. "We need to get you to a hospital." She shook her head weakly. "He has connections there. Doctors who'll say whatever he pays them to say." "Not at my hospital," Cedric said. "My doctors answer to me. No one else." Victor shifted his grip, preparing to move. But before they could leave, Haya's hand reached out and caught Cedric's sleeve. Her fingers were skeletal, trembling with the effort. "Wait," she whispered. "Your eyes. I've seen them before." Cedric went very still. He looked at her face, really looked, and something clicked into place. A memory from years ago, blurry and half forgotten. A cramped apartment in a dangerous neighborhood. A woman with kind eyes who had opened her door to a bleeding stranger and asked no questions. Who had bandaged his wounds and fed him and let him sleep on her couch while the men hunting him searched the streets outside. He had been 23, running from a deal gone wrong. No money, no weapons, no allies, just a kid who had gotten in over his head and was about to pay for it with his life. The woman had been older then, her hair streaked with gray, but her eyes had been the same shape, the same color, the same look of determined kindness even in the face of danger. Maria, Cedric said, the name surfacing from somewhere deep. Maria, darling. Haya's eyes widened. That was my mother. She died 2 years ago. Cancer. The pieces fell together. The debt Cedric had never been able to repay. Maria had disappeared before he could return to thank her, moved to a different city, or maybe just vanished into the kind of life that left no forwarding address. He had looked for her once, years later when he had money and resources, but the trail had gone cold. And now here was her daughter, locked in an attic, pregnant, terrified. The universe offering him a chance to settle a debt he thought had died with the woman who saved him. She never told me, Haya said, her voice breaking. Never told me she helped someone like you. She wouldn't have, Cedric said quietly. Your mother was smart. She knew that knowing too much about me could get her killed. Did you ever go back? Did you ever try to find her? Yes, but I was too late. Haya's grip on his sleeve tightened. Then don't be too late now. Please, get me out of here before he finds a way to stop you. Cedric nodded and signaled to Victor. They moved toward the main entrance, cutting through the crowd. Mikhail tried to follow, shouting about legal action and kidnapping charges, but 2 of Cedric's men intercepted him, their presence alone enough to keep him at bay. Outside, 3 black SUVs waited in the circular drive, engines running. Victor carried Hia to the middle vehicle and carefully placed her in the back seat. A woman in medical scrubs climbed in beside her, immediately beginning an assessment, checking pulse, blood pressure, shining a light in her eyes. Cedric stood by the open door watching. Haya looked up at him, and for the first time since he found her, something like hope crossed her face. Thank you, she said. Thank your mother, Cedric replied. She's the one who taught me that some debts are worth paying. The door closed. The vehicles pulled away, taillights disappearing down the long driveway. Behind him, the party was still dissolving into chaos. But Cedric didn't care about that. He had come here for a business deal and left with something far more valuable. A chance to be human again. Cedric turned back toward the estate, his hands sliding into his pockets as he surveyed the wreckage of Michael Raymond's carefully constructed world. Guests were streaming toward their cars, phones pressed to ears, voices urgent and excited. This wasn't just gossip. This was a story that would spread through every social circle, every business network, every country club by morning. Mikkel's name would be synonymous with cruelty. His properties would lose value. His connections would evaporate. And Cedric hadn't even started yet. He walked back through the main entrance where Michael stood in the foyer, surrounded by his remaining security guards. The man looked smaller now, diminished. His expensive suit couldn't hide the fact that everything he had built was crumbling around him. You've destroyed me, Michael said, his voice hollow, over a woman you don't even know. Cedric stopped a few feet away, his expression cold and unyielding. I knew her mother. That's enough. This isn't over. I'll have lawyers. I'll press charges, kidnapping, trespassing, breaking and entering. Go ahead, Cedric said calmly. File your complaints. Talk to your lawyers. But while you're doing that, I'll be having conversations with people who matter. The district attorney who owes me favors. The federal agents investigating offshore accounts. The journalists who would love an exclusive about a real estate mogul who imprisons pregnant women. Michael's face drained of color. You're bluffing. Am I? Cedric pulled out his phone and made a show of scrolling through his contacts. Should I call them now? Or would you prefer I wait until morning when the news cycle is fresh? What do you want? I want you to disappear. Sell your properties. Liquidate your assets. Leave this city and never come back. If I see your face again, if I hear your name mentioned in any context that isn't a cautionary tale, I will make sure the rest of your life is spent in a cell. You can't do that. Cedric's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. I absolutely can. You locked a pregnant woman in an attic and served champagne to your friends while she starved. There isn't a jury in this country that wouldn't convict you. And before you think about running, know that I have people everywhere. You won't make it to the airport. Mikal's hands clenched into fists at his sides. She was mine. I had every right. Cedric moved so fast that Michael didn't have time to react. One moment he was standing 3 feet away. The next, his hand was wrapped around Michael's throat, slamming him against the marble wall hard enough to knock the wind from his lungs. She was never yours, Cedric said, his voice soft and lethal. People aren't property. And if you ever refer to her that way again, I'll forget about being civilized and just end you here. He released Mikhail, who collapsed against the wall, gasping for air. Cedric straightened his jacket and turned to leave, then paused. One more thing, he said without looking back. Haya's medical bills, her recovery, the child's care. You're paying for all of it. I'll send you the invoices, and you'll pay them without complaint. Or I'll make sure every penny you have left goes to her in a civil suit. He walked out, leaving Mikhail crumpled against the wall, the ruins of his empire scattered around him like broken glass. The drive to the hospital took 20 minutes. Cedric sat in the back of his sedan, watching the city lights blur past, his mind already moving through the logistics. Haya would need protection, a safe place to recover, legal representation to ensure Michael couldn't claim any rights to the child, medical care that extended beyond just physical recovery. His phone rang. Victor. Status? Cedric asked. She's stable, dehydrated and malnourished, but the baby's heartbeat is strong. Doctor says another week in that attic, and we might have been too late. Cedric's jaw tightened. What else? She's asking for you. That surprised him. Why? Didn't say. Just keeps asking when you'll be here. I'm 5 minutes out. The hospital was one Cedric had invested in years ago, a state-of-the-art facility that catered to people who valued privacy and discretion. He owned 30% of it, which meant he had influence over who worked there and who got access to patient information. He entered through a private entrance, bypassing the main lobby. A doctor met him in the hallway, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an efficient manner. Mr. Russell, she said, falling into step beside him. Your patient is in room 412. We've started fluids and nutrition through an IV. Her vitals are improving, but she's severely dehydrated and underweight for someone 7 months pregnant. The baby? Strong heartbeat, no signs of distress. but we'll need to monitor closely over the next few days. The stress she's been under could cause complications. Whatever she needs, she gets it. Cost isn't a concern. The doctor nodded. Understood. There's something else. She has bruising consistent with restraint, old injuries that weren't treated properly. I'm required by law to report suspected abuse. Do it, Cedric said, and make sure your report is thorough. I want documentation of everything. They reached room 412. The doctor knocked once and opened the door. The room was large and quiet, decorated more like a hotel suite than a hospital room. Haya lay in the bed, an IV line running into her arm, her hair cleaned and brushed, wearing a hospital gown that looked far too big on her frail frame. She turned her head when Cedric entered, and something in her expression shifted. Relief, maybe, or recognition of safety for the first time in weeks. You came, she said softly. I said I would. The doctor excused herself, leaving them alone. Cedric stood at the foot of the bed, unsure for the first time that evening. He had faced down armed men without hesitation, had negotiated deals worth millions without breaking a sweat. But standing in front of this woman, this stranger who carried his debt in her eyes, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Uncertainty. I don't know how to thank you, Haya said. There aren't words for what you did. You don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. You risked your business deal, your reputation. You walked into a stranger's house and pulled me out of hell. Why? Cedric moved to the chair beside her bed and sat down. Your mother saved my life once. I was young and stupid and in trouble I couldn't get out of. She let me into her home when anyone else would have called the police, fed me, kept me safe until I could leave. Haya's eyes filled with tears. She never told me. She was protecting you, keeping you away from my world. And now I'm in it anyway. Not if you don't want to be. Once you're recovered, you can go wherever you want. I'll make sure you have resources, protection, a fresh start. Haya was quiet for a long moment, her hand resting on her swollen belly. The baby moved beneath her palm, a visible ripple across the thin hospital gown. What if I don't want to leave? Cedric looked at her, confused. What do you mean? I mean, what if I want to stay? Not with you, I don't mean that. But near you. Somewhere safe. Somewhere I know he can't reach me. He won't reach you anywhere. I'll make sure of that. You say that now. But you have a life. A business. You can't watch over me forever. Cedric leaned back in the chair, studying her. She was right, of course. He couldn't dedicate his life to protecting her. But the thought of walking away, of settling this debt with money and lawyers, and then disappearing back into his own world, felt wrong, incomplete. Then stay, he said finally. I have properties, safe houses, pick one. Live there as long as you need. Why would you do that? Because your mother taught me that kindness isn't weakness, and I've spent 20 years forgetting that lesson. Maybe it's time I remembered. Haya smiled, small and fragile, but genuine. She would have liked knowing you turned out okay. I don't know if I'd call it okay. You saved me. That's more than okay. The words hung in the air between them, simple and honest. Cedric wasn't used to gratitude that came without strings attached, without someone wanting something in return. In his world, every gesture had a price, every kindness was currency. But Haya looked at him like he had done something extraordinary, when all he had done was the bare minimum of human decency. He cleared his throat, uncomfortable with the weight of her gaze. Get some rest. The doctor said you need to stay here for at least 3 days. After that, we'll figure out next steps. Will you come back? She asked. And there was something vulnerable in the question, like she was afraid he might disappear now that the dramatic rescue was over. Yes, he said, surprising himself with how easily the answer came. I'll come back. He left her room and found Victor waiting in the hallway, arms crossed, expression neutral but eyes knowing. Victor had been with him long enough to read the subtle shifts in Cedric's demeanor, the small tells that indicated when something had gotten under his skin. She's important to you, Victor said. It wasn't a question. She's a debt, Cedric replied. Debts don't make you check your watch every 5 minutes during the drive over. Cedric shot him a look that would have made most men back down. Victor just raised an eyebrow, unfazed. It was one of the reasons Cedric kept him around. Loyalty was valuable, but loyalty combined with the courage to call him on his nonsense was irreplaceable. Make sure the room is guarded, Cedric said, changing the subject. 2 men, rotating shifts. No one gets in without clearance from me or the doctor. Already done, and I took the liberty of running background on Michael Raymond. You're going to want to see this. They moved to a private waiting area. Victor pulled out a tablet and opened a series of documents: bank statements, property records, email communications, the kind of information that required either a warrant or someone very good at bypassing security systems. Cedric had both options available, and he rarely bothered with warrants. He's buried in debt, Victor said, scrolling through financial records. The estate is mortgaged twice over. The properties he was trying to sell you, he doesn't actually own them outright. He's leveraged everything, and from what I can see, he's about 6 months from bankruptcy. So he was desperate, Cedric said. Desperate enough to lock up his wife when she threatened to expose him. Gets worse. Look at this. Victor opened an email thread. Haya found proof he was laundering money through his real estate deals, moving cash for some very unpleasant people. If that information had gone public, he wouldn't just be bankrupt. He'd be dead. Cedric read through the emails, his expression darkening with each message. Michael hadn't just been hiding financial crimes. He had been playing with people who didn't forgive mistakes, who settled disputes with bullets instead of lawyers. Send this to the DA, Cedric said. All of it. And make sure copies go to the FBI Financial Crimes Division. You want him arrested? I want him destroyed. Legally, financially, socially. By the time we're done, Michael Raymond won't have a friend left in the world. Victor nodded and pocketed the tablet. What about the people he was working with? They're not going to be happy when their money man gets arrested. Let them come. I've dealt with worse. They parted ways in the parking garage. Cedric slid into the back of his sedan and pulled out his phone. It was nearly midnight, but the person he needed to call would still be awake. Lawrence Kimball answered on the 3rd ring, his voice sharp despite the hour. Cedric, this is late even for you. I need a favor, Cedric said without preamble. Of course you do. What kind of favor are we talking about? Legal representation for someone, a woman who's been abused by her husband. I want a lawyer who can bury him so deep he never sees daylight again. There was a pause. Lawrence was a fixer, someone who specialized in making problems disappear or, when necessary, making sure they exploded in exactly the right direction. He and Cedric had worked together for years, a relationship built on mutual benefit and carefully maintained boundaries. This personal? Lawrence asked. It's a debt. Those are often the most dangerous kind. Give me the details. Cedric outlined the situation, keeping it brief and factual. Lawrence listened without interrupting, and Cedric could almost hear him taking notes, categorizing information, building a strategy. "I'll have someone there by morning," Lawrence said when Cedric finished. "Best family lawyer in the state. She'll handle the divorce, the restraining order, custody arrangements for the child. Everything. Bill me directly. I don't want Haya worrying about costs." "Understood. Anything else?" "Keep it quiet. No press, no publicity. This stays contained." "Done. I'll call you tomorrow with an update." The call ended. Cedric leaned his head back against the seat and closed his eyes. The night had started with a business deal and ended with him dismantling a man's entire existence. It should have felt satisfying. In his line of work, destroying enemies was part of the job description. But there was no satisfaction here, just a quiet, persistent anger at what Mikkel had done, at what Haya had endured, at how close she had come to dying in that attic. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. He opened it and felt ice slide down his spine. "You made a mistake tonight. She belongs to me. This isn't over. Mikhail." The fool had actually sent a threatening text from what was probably a burner phone, too arrogant or too desperate to realize how stupid that was. Cedric forwarded the message to Victor with a single word: "Document." Then he typed a reply: "Come near her again, and there won't be enough left of you to identify." He sent it, and immediately called his head of security. "I need a detail on Haya Darling's room increased to 4 men, and I want surveillance on Michael Raymond. Every move he makes, I want to know about it." Expecting trouble? Expecting stupidity, which is often worse. 20 minutes later, Cedric was back at his own residence, a penthouse that overlooked the city. The space was modern and cold, all steel and glass and expensive furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. He poured himself a drink and stood at the window, watching the lights below. Somewhere out there, Michael was probably drowning in rage and desperation, plotting ways to reclaim what he thought he owned. And somewhere in that hospital, Hia was sleeping for the first time in weeks without fear, protected by men Cedric trusted with his life. The equation should have been simple: debt paid, woman saved, case closed. But something about this felt unfinished. Maybe it was the look in Haya's eyes when she asked if he would come back. Maybe it was the memory of her mother's kindness all those years ago. Or maybe it was just the uncomfortable realization that for the first time in a very long time, he had done something that felt right instead of just profitable. His phone rang again. He glanced at the screen and smiled despite himself. It was Lawrence, calling back far sooner than expected. "You work fast," Cedric said. "I made some calls. You're not going to like this." The amusement died. "Talk." "Michael Raymond filed a missing person report an hour ago. Claims his wife was kidnapped from his home by armed men. He's naming you specifically." Cedric's grip tightened on the glass. "Let him. We have witnesses. We have medical documentation. We have a house full of people who saw her condition." "I know, and his case will fall apart the moment it hits a courtroom. But he's making noise, Cedric. Loud noise. The kind that attracts attention from people who might not care about the truth." "Then we make our own noise. Louder. I want a press conference tomorrow. Doctor's statement. Pictures of her injuries. Everything. We bury him in evidence before he can spin the narrative. That'll expose her." Put her in the public eye. Only if she agrees. It's her choice. And if she says no, then we do it the quiet way. But either path, Michael doesn't win. Lawrence was silent for a moment. You're really invested in this. I told you, it's a debt. Right, a debt. Keep telling yourself that. The call ended. Cedric finished his drink and set the empty glass on the counter. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and press conferences and the messy work of dismantling a man's life piece by piece. But tonight, for just a few hours, Haya was safe. And that was enough. Morning came too quickly. Cedric had slept maybe 3 hours, his mind refusing to quiet even when his body demanded rest. He was back at the hospital by 7:30 a.m., carrying coffee he didn't need and answers he hoped Haya was ready to hear. The guards outside her room nodded as he approached. Inside, Haya was sitting up in bed, looking significantly better than she had the night before. Color had returned to her cheeks. Her eyes were clearer. The IV drip continued its steady flow, replenishing what weeks of neglect had stolen. She smiled when she saw him, and something in Cedric's chest tightened unexpectedly. You came back. I said I would. People say a lot of things. He pulled the chair closer to her bed and sat down. Mikhail filed a missing person report. He's claiming I kidnapped you. The smile disappeared. Fear flashed across her face, quick and raw. Can he do that? Can he make them believe him? He can try, but he won't succeed. We have witnesses, medical evidence, your testimony. His case falls apart the moment anyone looks at the facts. But what if they don't look at the facts? What if his lawyers twist everything? What if I end up back there? Her voice was rising, panic bleeding into each word. Her hand moved protectively to her stomach. Cedric leaned forward, his voice steady and calm. Look at me. That's not going to happen. You're never going back to that house. You're never going back to him. I promise you that. You can't promise something like that. Yes, I can, because I have resources he doesn't, connections he can't match, and a willingness to destroy him completely if that's what it takes to keep you safe. Haya studied his face, searching for something, certainty maybe, or proof that his words weren't just empty comfort. Whatever she found seemed to satisfy her because her breathing slowed, the panic receding. Why are you doing this? She asked. I know you said it's because of my mother, but this feels like more than repaying a debt. Cedric was quiet for a long moment. It was a fair question, one he had been asking himself since the moment he found her in that attic. The truth was complicated, layered with guilt and old memories and a growing recognition that somewhere along the way, his life had become hollow, profitable but empty, powerful but lonely. Your mother showed me kindness when I didn't deserve it, he said finally. When everyone else saw a criminal, she saw someone who needed help. That changed something in me, made me believe I could be more than what the streets had made me. And then I spent 20 years forgetting that lesson, building an empire on ruthlessness instead of compassion. And now I'm remembering, because seeing you in that attic, seeing what he did to you, it reminded me what happens when people forget how to be human, when they start treating others like possessions instead of people. Haya's eyes glistened with tears. My mother would have liked you. I doubt that. I'm not a good man, Haya. I've done things that would horrify most people. But you saved me. That makes you good enough. Before Cedric could respond, There was a knock on the door. A woman in a sharp gray suit entered, carrying a leather briefcase. She was in her 40s, with auburn hair pulled into a professional twist and eyes that missed nothing. "Miss Darling, I'm Catherine Reeves. Mr. Russell retained me to represent you in all legal matters concerning your separation from Michael Raymond." Haya looked at Cedric, confused. "I can't afford a lawyer." "You're not paying," Cedric said. "I am." "But that's too much. I can't let you do that." "It's already done. Catherine is the best family lawyer in the state. She'll handle everything. The divorce, restraining orders, custody arrangements, all of it." Catherine set her briefcase on the small table and pulled out several documents. "I've reviewed the preliminary information Mr. Russell provided. Based on the medical reports and witness statements, we have an exceptionally strong case. Michael won't be able to contest the divorce or claim any parental rights." "What about the missing person report?" Haya asked. "A publicity stunt. The police have already seen the medical evidence. They know what happened. The report will be dismissed, and if Michael continues making false claims, we'll file charges for harassment and filing a false report." Relief washed over Haya's face so completely that she looked like she might cry. "It's really over? He can't touch me anymore?" "Legally, he's finished," Catherine said. "But I want to be clear. Men like Michael don't always respect legal boundaries. You'll need protection until we're certain he's moved on." "I'll handle that," Cedric said. "She'll have security until the threat is neutralized." They spent the next hour going over paperwork. Catherine explained each document with patient precision, making sure Haya understood her rights and options. By the time the lawyer left, Haya looked exhausted but hopeful. Like someone seeing the possibility of a future for the first time in months. "What happens now?" she asked when they were alone again. "Now you heal. You focus on yourself and the baby. Everything else I'll take care of." "And then what? After I'm healed? After the baby comes? What happens to us?" The question hung between them, weighted with implications neither of them had fully acknowledged yet. There was an us forming here, something that had started as a debt and was becoming something else, something neither of them had names for yet. "I don't know," Cedric admitted. "I'm not good at this, at caring about people. I've spent most of my life avoiding it." "Maybe it's time to stop avoiding it." "Maybe." Haya reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were still too thin, still bearing the marks of what she had endured, but her grip was steady. "Thank you for everything, for saving me, for caring, for remembering what my mother taught you." Cedric looked at their joined hands and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not obligation, not calculation, just simple, uncomplicated gratitude that he had been in the right place at the right time to make a difference. "Your mother saved me once," he said quietly. "Now I'm returning the favor." "I think you're doing more than that." "What do you mean?" "I think you're saving yourself too." The words struck deeper than he expected. Maybe she was right. Maybe pulling Haya out of that attic had pulled him out of something too. A life built on cold transactions and emotional distance. A world where power mattered more than people, and success was measured in dollars instead of connections. "Get some rest," he said, gently releasing her hand. "I'll be back tomorrow." "Promise?" "Promise." He left her room and found Victor waiting in the hallway with news. Michael had been arrested an hour ago. The FBI had moved faster than expected, raiding his properties and seizing documents. The money laundering charges alone would put him away for years. The abuse charges would ensure he stayed there even longer. "It's over," Victor said. "He's done." Cedric nodded, but he didn't feel the satisfaction he expected. Destroying Michael Raymond had been necessary, but it was just the cleanup. The real work was what came next. Helping Haya rebuild. Being present for someone who needed him. Learning how to be human again after years of forgetting how. He walked out of the hospital into bright morning sunlight and realized something had shifted. The city looked the same. The streets were still crowded. The buildings still reached toward an indifferent sky. But somehow, everything felt different. Lighter. Like a weight he hadn't known he was carrying had finally been lifted. His phone buzzed with incoming messages. Business matters that needed attention. Deals that required decisions. The machinery of his empire continuing its relentless operation. But for the first time in years, Cedric let the messages wait. Because some things were more important than profit. Some debts were worth more than money. And some people were worth remembering how to care about. He thought about Haya's mother, wherever she was now, and hoped she knew. That the kindness she had shown a bleeding stranger all those years ago had come full circle. That her daughter was safe. That the debt had been paid not with money or power, but with something far more valuable. Humanity. The kind that saves lives. The kind worth fighting for. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, wait until you see what's coming next. It's even more powerful and inspiring than you can imagine. So don't go anywhere. Click on that video showing on your screen right now to dive into another amazing story that will absolutely blow your mind. Trust me, you won't regret it.